I'll still send my royalties on my agencies.
Yeah, I'll keep going on time too.
Hello, Jesus Christ. Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming along to today's workshop or panel discussion on the power of student leadership. My name is Greenough and I will be your MC for this evening. We're delighted to be joined by three fantastic panelists. I'll give them an introduction and then we'll start with a few questions that I'll instigate, and then we'll bring it back to you guys if you have any questions from the audience as well. So, first of all, we have Síona Cahill, who is a social change activist, campaigner, and communications professional from County Longford. She graduated from Maynooth University and was elected Vice President for Welfare at Maynooth University Students' Union, using the platform to mobilise and lead students on campaigns such as marriage equality, student sexual health and consent, mental well-being and access to education. In 2016, she was elected to the national position of Vice President for Equality and Citizenship for the Union of Students in Ireland and was later elected the President. She is currently a board member of both the Irish Family Planning Association and the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre. Síona is now an experienced broadcast communicator, internal and external comms professional, and is a strategist and advocate in the charity and NGO sector in Ireland. Síona was named as one of 100 Women Changing Ireland in 2021 by the Irish Examiner and one of the Irish Independent's Rising Stars 50 Ones to Watch in 2023. Thank you for coming, Síona. Next up we have Pierre Yimbong, who is an activist and former Students' Union officer, having held a number of leadership roles. Pierre ran for Vice President for Education and President of TIT Students' Union, who led the colleges and unions in the merger and technological university status, and was finally elected across the three campuses to become the first TU Dublin Students' Union President. Pierre has a background in law and intellectual property law, and he is currently undertaking a Master's in Corporate Governance. He works in Engineers Ireland as a community engagement executive, supporting students, graduates, and global members in their professional development as engineers and working to make Ireland an inclusive society for the Black and mixed-race Irish community. Pierre is also the Governance Director at Black and Irish and a Deputy President of JCI Dublin. Thank you, Pierre. And last but certainly not least, we have Sam Blanckensee, who is the Equality Officer at Maynooth University in the Office of the Vice President for Equality and Diversity. They support EDI in the university through enabling structures and by assisting with the development of appropriate behaviours and culture. They are also the chair of the Board of Directors at the Transgender Equality Network Ireland, or TENI. Previously, Sam held the role of National Membership and Campaigns Officer with the Irish Traveller Movement. Prior to working with the ITM, they were a Policy and Research Officer and National Development Officer at the Transgender Equality Network Ireland. Sam was included on the Forbes 30 Under 30 Europe list in 2017 in Law and Policy and in Youngest. Sam has experience in managing both political and educational campaigns at a national, international, and student level, and they are heavily involved with the LGBTQ+ community and LGBTQ+ politics. So I always like being the least qualified one at the table.
I'm not even on the list. Well, I'm sure I'm on the list somewhere.
Get on the list.
No fly list, maybe.
It's about how much you pay them.
Yeah.
You apply yourself. It's not.
Fair enough.
So I suppose each of our three panelists obviously have made very significant contributions to the student movement and overall Irish society. So I suppose we might just start kind of by passing around the mic, and if you guys want to speak on what made you want to get involved in student politics, and maybe any advice you'd have to someone that's considering putting themselves forward for a leadership role.
Right. Hi, Steve. Oh God. I will use the mic. Okay. That is a very dramatic description of me.
I didn't.
Thank you. I'm a graduate of Maynooth University. I went to college, studied law and sociology, hadn't a clue what I was at, got very involved in student societies, mainly the debating society, and then anything else I could put my hand to, like designing posters or like showing up, just because I was mad to kind of make new friends. I was from Longford and there wasn't actually that many people from my school that went to Maynooth at the time, so I was just trying to get involved. And so the reason why I'm starting with that is because I had absolutely no ground designs whatsoever when it came to students' union politics or anything related to politics at the beginning. And it was never my plan to sit in front of you and be like, I'm a change maker. Like, that's just not where it was. So I was in Maynooth, I was, a small fish in a big Maynooth pool, and I just really wanted to make friends and got involved in stuff. So through my involvement with stuff though, I loved meeting people, I loved organising. I realised that I wouldn't have understood it as campaigning at the time, but trying to get people into rooms like this, any way possible, to when we were had a speaker coming in for the debating society or whatever. And so it became a thing that I was good at, where I got good at talking to people, got good at communicating to people and getting them to come to stuff or whatever. And over time I realised that I also really cared about the college. I cared about other students who were going to Maynooth. And I also saw a lot of problems that were facing students, not just me, but loads more people. And I cared, I gave a shit. And again, while I was involved in student kind of societies, Students' Union never really kind of came up for me at all. And then this guy, Aidan, who was the welfare officer at the time of the Students' Union, was a good friend of mine. We studied law together. And he called me up one day. He didn't call, I would never answer a call. He messaged me or whatever and was like, I'm cooking chicken Kievs, will you come over? And I was like, free meal, amazing. So I went over to his house, and what I didn't realise was he had an agenda. And the agenda was, not sexual agenda, or anything, we weren't dating. The agenda was that he wanted to talk to me about kind of running for his role. He was succession planning, he was the welfare officer, and he was like, Síona, I'm giving you this chicken Kiev because I want you to consider running for the Students' Union. And I was like, are you fucking well? I was like, absolutely not. That's a cool person's role, people who know loads of people. And he was like, you do know loads of people. You're someone who's always around campus, you're always talking to people, you care about how people are, and you're really involved in student societies, and you also have opinions on lots of things. And I was like, I do. And he basically, over a long period of time, kind of talked to me about the role that he had, which was in welfare and equality. And I realised I actually cared a lot about what he did. And I couldn't believe that I'd never really gotten involved in anything he was doing, particularly around contraception, particularly around kind of consent and sexual health and awareness and mental health stuff. And they were all things that were very relevant to me and very relevant to the people around me. And I realised at that point that maybe I should just give this a crack. And so when I don't go halves on things, you can kind of see that from the old bio, but when I decided I was running, then Jesus, I was running. I put this massive team together, and we got purple t-shirts, and I bought a rake load of lollies and bananas and all this shite, and I was like, I am running for this role. And I read up everything I could about the position and all of that, and I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I hadn't really been a hack at all, and I know that that's a big thing with students' unions. It feels like the only people who can run are the people who are in. I've never been a class rep, I know you say that now and people are like, sorry?
Same here.
Yeah, right. And then I ended up USI President years later, and it's for shame that I've never even been involved. So anyway, the long story, and I can't tell the long story short, but I ran and I absolutely blasted your man that was against me, and absolutely out of the water, and I was like, holy shit, now I'm in this role. And it was the best decision that I've ever made over a chicken Kiev. And honestly, we can chat more about all the things that go on with the Students' Union and why else, but in terms of advice, which is probably a whole different section of this conversation, but the advice is to care enough before you run. If you're only kind of half in, don't do it. Because being in the Students' Union is something that will take over so much of your life and your personality and who you are. And it's a really, really, really important position. It's a really important role, but it takes a lot out of you, and you have to care about it enough for that to be worth it. And it was worth it for me. Most of us who have done it will say that it was worth it, but it does take a toll, and it needs to be something that you're serious about. So I'm flippant about my chicken Kiev story, but I really did consider it. And as I said, I talked to a lot of people before I ran. And when I ran, I was certain that I would be somebody who would be good at that job and could make changes and all of that. So yeah, be certain. And that's an easy thing to say. It's easier said than done. I started and did a lot of women in leadership work when I was in the Union of Students in Ireland, because we had a significant problem with women and minorities running for elections across Students' Union everywhere, Minutes included. But in my work in women in leadership, it was really, really clear that confidence was a big problem for a lot of women and a lot of minority groups. So I say be sure, be confident. And many of you here who are even thinking about it might have come into the room today being like, I'll just be a campaign manager. Like, I'll just here to listen to see what the crack is. But actually, you do have it in you to be the person to be in the role. So just have a think about that over the next, I don't know when the process, whether it's begun or whatever, but do have a good think about that. And if you came in the door thinking you might be a campaign manager or be great on a team, actually maybe think about being the person who puts your name on the ballot, because that's really important too.
Yeah, I don't think I have quite an exciting story like that. No. I wish it started like that. But mine did start almost with a class rep, so that's how, obviously, like Síona, thinking going to college that, yeah, I'll just get in, get out, do my studies in some ways, and maybe make a bit of get involved in stuff. But yeah, one of the first few weeks of college, obviously, around, especially with obviously DIT at the time, being across multiple campuses, the local college officer will come into the class to elect the class rep. And I'm generally a shy person, not the public speaking kind of person, but I decided, why not? This sounds something interesting, so I put myself forward. Also for other people put themselves forward for the role of class rep. I did win, so I was kind of like, F you, SU. I'm not coming back to you anytime soon. So it's like, societies, you're a bit more crack. So I decided to get more involved with societies. But then obviously second semester came around, and obviously the whole buzz around elections and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure like here in UCD and other campuses, it's a big, really fun experience, especially if you're a campaign manager or involved in a campaign team. Not for the candidates really, because that's a very stressful experience, but you just have to turn up, wear t-shirts, throw a few lollies and be like, yeah, vote for this guy. Why? Just vote for him. Or this person. So basically, yeah, that's how I first probably got involved in kind of, the aspect of elections in some ways, and obviously helping the close friend at the time to run for college officer. And then obviously the following year, obviously ran for a position on obviously the student council. I guess you have the equivalent here of being like a school representative on that. So obviously that's got more involved or understanding how student politics kind of work. But I still never had any interest of running for a position again. I'm a shy person, so I never thought, no, I don't want to put myself in that spotlight and in that kind of role itself. But I guess the nature when you do get yourself in those kind of spaces, people see you, they start nudging you to get into those positions and put yourself forward. So that's what happened, and by the college officer time against succession planning, I'm guessing he nudged me to go for a role at Bonnie Demne. So obviously, I was encouraged, and obviously in my final year, probably the best idea, doing final year law, thinking that, probably need to get a job next year and do well and all that. I shouldn't really be stressing about, running for a part-time position in my second year and doing that role if I was elected in my final year. But nonetheless, after some strong encouragement, I went for it, but then obviously the stress of actually, there's lots to do with this election business, so obviously I put together a campaign team and a campaign manager, and then I realised I really can't actually speak in front of people. So I do remember the day that myself and my campaign manager went into almost like a little black box theatre, basically, for what German societies kind of use for practicing. And I went in there for the first time with a sheet of paper with, well, obviously, basically my campaign speech to practice. And he's like, oh no, this is going to be a long day. And it was a long day, basically drilling into me how I could actually stand up in front of the class. I really sell myself and sell why they should vote for me. And obviously, yeah, that really changed me from then on, because obviously, like that, maybe I didn't trash the candidate in the election, but obviously I did win in the end, and very obviously competitive, and it was great enjoyment at the time, well, at least I could say as a candidate, when I did do the election, for at least for college officer, and obviously then enjoying that experience being a part-time officer, and obviously that started in a spiral effect. Obviously when you get into one position, then you see that they're going for further positions, which sometimes can be in a bad way, because then you fall into that trap of going into that clique or into a hack of just keep going for every position possible. But in the same way, in terms of an advice as to why you should run for a role, is also like if you can give something to the role, but also I think selfishly is what you can get from the role. So definitely when I ran for college officer, I knew I could give a lot for it, but it could also help me, and obviously being involved and being a hopefully prospective lawyer. Obviously that hasn't happened because I'm not working as a lawyer, I'm working in Engineers Ireland. That obviously could help build my communication skills, my public speaking skills, and any other aspects that might help me in my career. And definitely I knew that I could definitely develop myself in different roles that I took upon myself through going through the movement, while as well as hopefully giving back to the student body and being involved in it. I guess that very much very transformative period for DIT at the time and across the whole technological university sector, and be involved in those many changes itself. So yeah, that was a bit, I guess, how I started, and obviously it kind of brought me forward to running for obviously president, the last president of DIT at the time. I still don't know why I decided, after being DIT, why I wanted to keep going. After obviously I can obviously go into it a bit more later on. The whole TU process was not the fun, some tedious times of it, but I still had the passion and fire in me to still give to it, and I still knew that, I guess selfishly, that I was the best person in the role at the time to carry forward and obviously take the three colleges to the next level and become a technological university. So yeah, taking out from that, hopefully a bit of an advice is, similar to Síona, obviously you have to have passion and a will to do it, but also both on a personal level, because it will take a lot from you. Really, the role, especially I guess for a full-time position, it's handier when it's a part-time position, because and whilst I know it's different kind of operations in UCD in terms of your conveners and your part-time roles, but obviously in terms of full-time roles across every SU in the country, it's like it's not like a 9-to-5 job, or 9 to 9. It is a 24-hour job, either in your head or when you're doing stuff, because you're really on call, trying to think about the next campaign or the next issue, or preparing for the next governing body meeting, but you're still out the night before. So again, you still have to be ready for it, and it's those very tight few months. And that's also when it comes into preparing for your campaign, because obviously you're trying to sell the sun, moon and stars for people to vote for you, but you also have to be realistic in terms of what you can actually achieve in those timelines, and what you can do. Obviously sometimes in foresight you can see that obviously there's going to be a massive change in the way, so obviously I can see that obviously we're moving to range government, so that's going to be a big project, or the TU is going to be the one that takes over. Obviously for some, no one could foresee COVID, which obviously maybe those who ran in 2019 had huge ambitions, but then COVID obviously disrupted that. So again, sometimes you have to just sell yourself and not try and sell the idea as much as possible, because you may not be able to, again, achieve it the way that you want to, but even if you do, or not achieve it, you may also be the one to start it. And the same way, also the TU, many of my predecessors had the ambitions of delivering it, and I've been the lucky one to come out with that. But you can obviously set this foundation of it, and obviously be proud of that you've got something started. So hopefully that gives a bit of a story of where I started.
He's not a bit shy.
Not now, I guess, unfortunately.
So I'm a graduate of UCD, so I studied veterinary nursing here, and I am the only one of us to not win an election. but I would have got involved with SU politics, I think, in my second year. As a veterinary nursing student, I don't know if it's still the same, it probably is, vet was quite an insular group, so very few of us stood outside of the vet building very often, and mostly we kept to ourselves. So 2012 was a very different time to be trans in UCD. There were probably 3 or 4 trans people out, and being the only person telling your story means you either go 2 ways. You keep quite quiet so that you're not the one who's drawn attention to, or you speak up. And I guess I was the person who spoke up. So I was very involved with societies predominantly. So I was very involved with the LGBT society, and I got really, really involved in my first year. Then I decided to run for the LGBT coordinator in the students' union. And alongside that was doing national campaigning. So I kind of used the SU and use that as a place to start speaking up, and very much kind of talking to other people about what it was to be trans and developing solidarity with other people within the union. Like, at that point, there was 1 person of colour in the students' union. I was the only trans person. There were very few LGBT people elected. We very much were kind of on our own and trying to build solidarity with each other. So like, we were trying to, at council, just talk about some of the issues that were coming up. And I guess running, I was excited by the fact that you could take a year out and talk about issues that mattered. And so I ran in 2014, which I think is the same year you ran. Yeah. So I remember your t-shirts because our t-shirts were similar. I just wasn't successful. But as far as I'm aware, I was the first trans person to run for a sabbatical role in the country. And I was really scared, actually. And I'm sure other people who were the first people of their marginalised group to run were also scared. But it was that idea of, okay, I'm running for this, but not only am I thinking about, okay, this is huge, there's money involved, there's trying to gather a team together. I'm not from arts, I'm not from law, I don't have a lot of people around me. There's also, are people going to talk about me being trans? I also definitely picked a really strange time in the fact that I had surgery 2 weeks before the campaign started. I don't know if the poster race is still done.
It's back this year.
It was violent that year. It was violent that year. So it was a really difficult experience, but also something I'm really glad I did. So although I didn't win either of the 2 times I tried to be elected, running in the Students' Union and getting involved with the Students' Union really gave me a platform to go further. So my involvement in SU politics, but also in student societies, meant that although I graduated with a degree in veterinary nursing, I went straight to working for TENI. So I finished my quite medical, quite specific degree and went straight into working in what I really cared about. And I also got the chance to be part of passing the Gender Recognition Act in Ireland. And lots of my student politics days and my trying to get a degree days were spent in the Dáil, or speaking to TDs and senators and kind of bringing that back to the SU and talking about how SUs needed to be getting involved with this. And 2014-15 was a very strange year in the fact that not only were we fighting for, not only were we trying to do the SU, we were also trying to fight for marriage equality. The marriage equality campaign was very odd as an SU because everyone was in favour pretty much. So it wasn't that you were campaigning in the universities, but you were campaigning to try and get students to get involved. So rather than trying to get them to be involved here on campus, you were trying to get them to get involved nationally. And I was also trying to make sure that they knew about gender recognition and they knew that trans people had a lot of fight to do. And that when we were campaigning as students' unions, that we needed to not leave trans people behind because we were left behind quite a lot during the marriage equality referendum. So it was an interesting experience to do, especially as somebody who didn't win. And I think my recommendation to anyone who's putting themselves forward is to really respect your other candidates. So it can be really cutthroat to run in an SU election, especially if there's a number of candidates going, and you often know the people beforehand, and you can be very, very driven as to, okay, I really want to get there, like I really want this. You obviously put a lot of work into it. I think it's important to remember the other people who are running also have. And both of the races I ran, we probably didn't remember that as much as we should have. And I think the second time was easier for me in that one, but the first time, I think, just remembering that you need to be nice to each other, that you're all in there together, and you're all caring about what happens at the end of this. Nobody puts their name forward because they want an easy time in the SU. That doesn't exist. And regardless of whether you win a campaign or not, the learning from it is something you'll take forward. So like learning how to talk to people who you meet on the street because you want them to know about something you care about is terrifying to start with. But it's something that really will stand to you in the future, and being able to stand in front of a lecture and do 4 or 5 lecture addresses in 10 minutes, you're never going to do that again. But the fact that you can will make every other thing you do in terms of public speaking easier. So I guess that's probably what I have to add there.
If I can just quickly also add in terms of your point on respecting your other candidate, which I definitely echo again. Sometimes SU politics, I guess that's what I call it, SU politics, because again it's politics with a small p, is that again you have to be respectful to everybody you engage with, especially your other candidate. But speaking also on the other candidate and being someone who's also ran unopposed for high positions, also respect Ron, reopen nominations, is that don't take it for granted just because you're running unopposed. It's like, oh sure, I don't need to do the whole poster whole thing. I don't need to have a campaign team. Even though I'll see for president and I see for TUDSU that I ran that to make sure that I was running because obviously there's the challenge of obviously getting the other campuses on board and that they can also see that I will be there to represent them and obviously be their president in some way. So like that. Don't take it for granted if you're unopposed, like it's just an easy walk into position. It's also, you have to put yourself forward why you should be the one voting and that kind of way. But also I tried obviously to encourage others to run against it, because obviously that makes it fun is that you're also running against someone. But again, respect the elections and respect those who are participating in it for sure.
Actually, can I add one thing? So, sorry, this is slightly off topic, not really off topic, but now I obviously work in a university. And what's really cool about my job right now is I'm almost, like, I have a permanent role as an equality officer, but like my role also encompasses sexual violence and harassment for students and staff. So I'm basically doing the role I originally ran for. But I'm also now seeing SUs and how SUs work with the university and how important it is to hear the student voice. So I guess don't underestimate the power you have and how much the university wants to listen to you. And I guess if you're in one of those big meetings, if you are elected and you're in one of those big meetings, make sure your voice is heard, because the university is constantly trying to work out what the students want. And unless the SU is speaking up, and I guess unless the people who are elected here and elected in the next couple of weeks actually raise their voices when they're in those meetings, as scary as it can be, things aren't going to change. And if they are changing in the wrong way, sometimes the SU speaking up can put it back to where it's meant to be going.
Yeah, thank you so much for all those contributions, guys. And I suppose, Sam, actually, your last point kind of leads me into the next question. I think a lot of the work that student union officers do, whether full-time or part-time, is often behind the scenes, and often it's difficult to communicate the work that the union is doing to students, and also to communicate that despite raising your voice at every venture, at every board and committee, that sometimes the management team don't want to meet you in the middle, and there might not be progress made on an area that you might have set out to cover in your manifesto. What is your advice to students in that circumstance, or as people who have been in those circumstances, what are your reflections on it? Sorry, that was...
I can start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because
Take the bullet.
I'm lucky enough to be on the other side. So I guess I was never in the position of the SU officer, but I am in the position of a staff member who really wants to hear from the SU. but also sees their terms as very, very short. So like, I guess within the university, or at least within Maynooth, things change very slowly. And as I'm sure the officers who've been here for a year will say, lots of other things come onto your plate when you're in a job. So the things that you set out to do are not always the things that you can put as your top priority. And remember that all the staff members have the same issue, that they have 50 things on their plate in a day as well. But getting something started or continuing on good work is so important. So often I'll start a project with an SU officer and it may be 2 officers' time before we actually get it finished. But starting it is really important. I will say that continuing on what's been done before is also vital, because SUs often work on a year-by-year basis. If you're working more as okay, this really good thing is being done at the moment, I don't need to stop that and start something new that is on my manifesto. Continuing it on is just, that is, one, it's easier, but 2, that means the university seeing the SU as something that they can trust in, that it's not that they're going to want something completely different in the next year. Yes, starting some new things is important, but continuing them on and making sure that the good work continues is rather than throwing it out and starting afresh, it's definitely more effective.
So much of the students' union work is not the stuff that you're seen to be doing. So I started off as a welfare officer. I was elected for 2 years in Maynooth, and then I went on at a national level to be equality and citizenship for 2 years again, and then president. And the stuff that people saw me doing was the real sexy stuff. I was out with my megaphone and my t-shirts and a crowd of people behind me just yelling at the government, and that was we're really whipping up a storm here, guys, things are now happening, right? Or when I was in Maynooth, I was just fucking condoms at people. It was just this is the stuff, it's all action, and it's colour and it's exciting. But actually, the stuff that mattered so much more was the stuff that I didn't often get an opportunity either to talk about or blow a horn about or whatever. And it was the really not sexy stuff of trying, and it really speaks to your point, Sam. It was a lot about developing relationships with people. And part of that is when a students' union team or a students' union officer before you has started a really good relationship with the access office or whatever it is, or with particular people in university management, and you're trying to maintain that relationship and bring it forward, step it up a notch. That's not something you write on a poster, being had a great meeting today. But ultimately, and it also speaks to the point Sam makes, a lot of the stuff that I ended up either doing that I felt was more important than the kind of flashy kind of poster or campaign advocacy stuff were things that I couldn't claim credit for. Were going to be things that I was going to start a conversation with the university on, that I was never going to see the fruition of. And that is so important for you to be able to understand, accept, and continue with. And yes, there will be so many times, we, from the Union of Students in Ireland perspective, were at the point of kind of rowing with the government around income contingent loans. That was the starting point at which I was in the student movement and when I was in USI. And so the conversation was very much a live one in the political scene, particularly in Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, around looking at kind of an Australian model of income contingent loans as being the best way forward for funding the third level sector in Ireland. And so much of what we had to do and what students' unions and officers around the country had to do was build up meetings and hear no a lot. Meet with university management who wanted to charge more for internationals, who wanted to go down the road of income contingent loans or increase fees wholesale across the board from $3,000 at the time. And so it wasn't that we knew that within our term in the students' union we were going to come out in a flashy press conference and say, we did it, guys, we won. And at the same time try and maintain belief from the students and a relationship with the students, and communicating that we were working on this, that it was something that we cared a whole lot about, that in fact was like the core of why we were there, that like you can throw all the cons you want, and you can throw all the Shark Weeks and run really amazing mental health campaigns and lots of other stuff on campus. But if at your core, you're not thinking about the access in the first place, or the housing, or the key issues around education that people have every day, and about the quality of that education, then you're kind of missing the point of being a student union officer. And that while there needs to be kind of focused areas, that's why we have full-time officer roles, that's why you have conveners and part-time officers who are looking at kind of focused areas. Ultimately, as a team, you have to work together on like, what is the core thing that we're trying to pursue here? And a lot of the time it's about basic access to get in the door of UCD in the first place, to even have enough money to be able to stay in Dublin or commute to get to college. And that stuff is a harder sell on a ballot paper, it's a harder sell on manifestos, and it's going to be a harder sell during the year. Try and keep people with you, to remain interested in that cause. I mean, we got a lot of criticism in USI during the time that I was there. I was president from 2018 to 2019. And a lot of the criticism that I faced was around that our focus was too much on repeal, it was too much on reproductive rights, and all of that. And I absolutely accept that. But the reality was that the work that we were doing and the kind of lobbying that we were doing and the advocacy around the student cost of living, the housing crisis, and also in terms of the cost of actually going to college, were things that weren't things that could be settled by everybody getting out onto the street or running a massive campaign. It were things based on relationships. It was about making arguments with public officials, civil servants, politicians, political parties, trying to get people on board with what we were doing. So you're going to get a lot of no's. You are going to have scenarios where the management of the university is not going to run with you on stuff. It's going to be about gender neutral bathrooms, it's going to be about student spaces, it's going to be about like the quality of the Microsoft being 1997 in a lot of the rooms or whatever. And they're just going to be like, we're not going to give you the investment. And everyone that voted for you is expecting you to act on this. And sometimes you're going to have to turn around and say, I can't get this done, or I have done this, this, and this, and I want to be really clear with you that this is still a priority on my agenda, that I still bring it up at every staff meeting or governing authority, and I'm doing my absolute best, but this is going to be a long run. This is not good. Like, the best example I can give, and it's one in relation to repeal, is that in the 1980s, students' union activists from UCD, from Trinity, and from other places in the country kind of went out basically and started printing information around abortion access, because at the time, in the 1980s, it was illegal to give any kind of information about abortion and reproductive health care in Ireland. You couldn't print it, you couldn't be seen with it, and so the USI, UCD, Trinity and other colleges started printing that shit themselves and handing it out on the street. And in 1983 or 84, they were brought to the High Court by the Society for the Protection of Unborn Children. There was a court case, it was very dramatic, it was a lot of stress. That was in the 1980s, and in 1992 the Information Act came in and there was a change in the law and information was allowed. But it wasn't until 2018 that we had repeal of the 8th Amendment, right? So that is generations, and you're talking about 1-year terms of students' union officers. That is generation after generation after generation of students' union officers recommitting to this being a thing that they gave a shit about and continued to keep it on the agenda. And it wasn't always like the #1 thing on the agenda, but it was really important that they kept at it. So the thing is that the big idea that you're going to have on your manifesto and the thing you're going to talk to people about, it's not always achievable in your term, and that's okay. That's something that you need to be really clear about with yourself and being honest about it when you're asking people to vote for you. This is like a key priority for you. I might not get this done by Christmas, but I'm going to make sure it's on the agenda. I'm going to make sure people know about it. I'm going to make sure people are listening. And so that is a really hard thing to understand. There are no jobs, very few jobs, that you go into and you get like 9 months to achieve this thing. Like, it just doesn't, that's the way we don't want to work. It's the way we don't want PhDs and postgraduate students to be dealt with, as an example. But ultimately, you have to have the long-term strategy vision of being someone who knows that you're going to go in for a year, you're going to do your absolute best, you're going to build on the work that has been done before, change what needs to be changed where you can, and then carry the work forward. And again, that sounds so much easier said than done, but ultimately it's something that you have to believe in when you go into a student union role, be it class rep or otherwise, again. But yeah, that's what I'd say about that.
Yeah, couldn't say any better myself. And in terms of all you said there, really good points, and really is unfortunately the cost of the role that is you're running for a student officer. You think like you've got all the time in the world, so you don't think when you get elected in March, and obviously you start off in July, that you've got loads of time, but those months just fly by. Before you know it, that's you're already facing the next election, and therefore you have to stand up almost like in front of a court as to what did you do in order for you whether to be elected again in some instances. But it's always that challenge in the student body in terms of actually communicating to students what you're actually doing for them. And if what you're doing for them is what they elected you to do, or whether you're doing it for your own personal vision or your own personal ideal, or only for a smaller cohort of students. Again, it's the challenge of large student bodies, that you're trying to do something for all of them, and that benefits them, but again, that immediacy of they want something done now, but you may not be able to achieve it. But obviously one of the key things is obviously in order to have some kind of success or something to put forward as to what you're doing, is by actually trying to find allies in management, because there are some allies there. Obviously you'll probably find that the first of them would be in your student services, because obviously they are very much front-facing and obviously dealing with students on a daily basis, and they will probably are trying to support you in many ways that make their job easier, I'm sure, in terms of obviously getting those facilities and investment and support in place for students. So they can be obviously your allies in meetings. Obviously sometimes they're restricted as to how much they can support you, but in some ways again they can be your allies or the kind of insights, because I know obviously SUs are very different in terms of constructed, in terms of obviously again this challenge with officers coming in, if there's no much staffing in place, is that kind of history, or I don't know what's the word I'm trying to come up with, but obviously if there's obviously staff in the union, they'll be able to inform you this is the place, the person you can go to for this, or don't talk to them because they're not going to do anything for you, or this governing body meeting, or that kind of person won't help you there. But again, building those relationships, you'll be able to navigate who and the things that you can actually possibly achieve, or the ways that you can approach different situations. But again, like in every facet of life, really relationships help as much as possible. So obviously having those relationships with students and staying in touch with them in many instances. Obviously you can't tell them the juicy parts of what's going on in meetings, and especially in my first role, or what I call full-time officer role, being Vice Chancellor for Education, being in so many subcommittees of, I can't remember naming them all of them, in terms of obviously I can't, trying to explain to students that was literally half my day was just going to meetings all the time, and sometimes just reminding those in the meetings that, do you know that, we are an institution for students, so just to let you know, this is what actually students think about this situation, not to think that they're just making decisions for the sake of their own case, but again, in terms of trying to get that message across, can sometimes be a challenge in some instances. Another point to make is obviously for yourself, in terms of an officer, is how kind of honest you can be to yourself in terms of what you can actually achieve in that time and year, and whether like that, if something within even your remit, and something whether again if it goes to a national level, in terms of something that can be at least collaborative, and you can bring other students union or the national body to support you on it, or whether again you can try and start it small and hope that the next generation, or not the next generation, but the next officer will take it on for you and hopefully carry forward and bring that to success. But really it is always a challenge in terms of actually communicating to the student body in terms of what is a students' union, because I guess every student asks every single day, and there's always that question, it's like the students' union does nothing for me, like what's the point of having a students' union? And obviously it always comes to that case when you're running for elections and getting that vote and trying to convince that person to vote for you, being like, oh, I'm not going to vote because the students' union does nothing, but not realising actually having a students' union there really is obviously critical, because obviously if there wasn't there, then you won't have probably a lot of the things that you currently do, but sometimes it's hard to show now what's been done in the past, but showing that what can still be done and bring that forward to the student movement. So yeah, I hope that kind of helps in terms of those who are considering it. Don't be dissuaded by it. In terms of those short 9 presses months, there's a lot you can still achieve in that, even if you don't think you're going to achieve a massive amount or everything you can in a manifesto, because every small bit might really help someone. Definitely even in those roles of like welfare or equality, you may be helping one individual in terms of their own individual issues that they come across to you, in terms of cases that might come on your desk. So, helping them out it will mean a lot. It means that maybe they can stay in college or actually have a good experience. So that's a great achievement in itself, and maybe something again you can't put out in the flashy posters or parade because it may not be helping the massive amount, but it is helping that one individual student. So even take pride and enjoy those wins also for yourself, and obviously those that you can showcase as something that the students has achieved, or the student body and the student union has achieved. Again, showcase that students know that the student union is doing something for them, and that they can actually be able to celebrate with you, but be proud that the student union is there for them.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have to run out of here because, ironically enough, there's a debate. This house believes the SU is shit coming on, so we have to head out. But could we first of all just get a massive round of applause for all of our panelists? And I'm delighted to say as well that the conversations don't have to end here, because we have a drink receptions on in the O'Neill Lounge of the clubhouse. So apologies we didn't have any time for Q&A right now, but please feel free to join for some nibbles and drinks. And thank you again. And just to remind everyone, do have a long think about it if you want to run, but not too long, because nominations close on the 3rd of March at 5 p.m. and you need 150 signatures to get yourself on the ballot. So thank you very much, and thank you to all of you again.
Thank you, Rob.